Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wisdom Seeker Live. Glad to have everyone with us today and hope that you will let us know where you're joining from. Also, that you will share comments and questions and join the discussion. I appreciate everyone in regards. And I see Senna is already with us. Welcome this morning, Senna. Glad to have you and appreciate you being here right in the very beginning. And so, just a reminder that we like to talk about what wisdom means from a wisdom seeker standpoint. And for us, wisdom is a journey, and it involves journeying from starting with knowledge, what we find out, facts, figures, information around us, hopefully things that we learn formally and informally. And then we begin to take that knowledge and apply the knowledge to our lives and gain understanding about it. How does it work for us, with us, and then take it and develop it and use it and live it. And then the last step in this journey, which is the more important or critical step in the journey, is to step into wisdom. And in short, wisdom is when we begin to see things outside of ourselves with a much bigger picture. When we begin to recognize that our choices are a factor in uh, affecting our lives inside and out, as well as the lives of others. And so we began to get that bigger picture perspective. And for those of us that are of a spiritual bent, we like to think of that as beginning to see things through God's eyes and understanding and growing in that regard. So that's how we look at wisdom. And that journey is what we hope that you will join us on so that we can begin to truly seek wisdom so that we can grow and be healthier and get the benefit of wisdom, which is greater than any gold or silver or money or wealth or prestige, anything else. Wisdom is a great value to us. And welcome, Rick. Glad to have you from Kentucky. Good to see you this morning. And so, our topic for today is one that I think is especially relevant at the moment because of what we've seen going on in our current culture and in our circumstances, and it's about the use of humor. And one of the questions that I ask in a poll is whether or not just making, adding at the end of what we say, oh, I'm just kidding, oh, it was a joke, whatever. And in a broader sense, the use of comedic settings to say things, do things that seem to, in our culture today, have no limits. And it's becoming such a part of our culture, and I'm not sure that it's a healthy part. Uh, and what additional backdrop that I offered on this is, what recently happened in and around the, I believe it's the Emmys. I believe it is. I don't keep up with that in terms of recognizing media and so on a whole lot. But situation where Will Smith very publicly uh, physically slapped Chris Rock over a theoretical joke or comment that he made that was pointed towards Will Smith's wife. And And so what's been interesting to me as part of that situation is that we have, and rightfully so, challenged whether Will Smith should have struck um, Chris Rock. And I appreciate that using physical response is rarely the wisest, best way to approach disagreement or difficulties. And so I get that. But what I'm amazed at is, to my knowledge, what I have seen, and I've done a little reading and research and keeping up, and that nothing has been said at all in regards to the wisdom or appropriateness of the joke made that set this whole situation into motion. Good morning, or hello, Dr. Jesmond and Karen. Glad to have you guys, and appreciate y'all being here. And so anyway, I over the years, I have observed this whole behavior in and around comedy. We under the guise of comedy, we have brought to, unfortunately, the forefront of use of language in as considered appropriate in these comedic settings, to use profanity and bad, or what, I guess I'm old school, but talking about off-color jokes. And so under the guise of, well, we're just having some fun, we have challenged a lot of use of language and what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And so that's why I think that it's worth visiting and just discussing and looking at the wisdom involved. And part of it, just because it is maybe legal, doesn't make it wise. And in this particular case, the use of words and the way they're being used under the guise of comedy and of humor is a real concern about the effect on our culture. And we've even had situations, I know of a firsthand situation where a child, a school-age child, actually made written form, made threats against a school. And ultimately, nothing was done to this child because at the end of what they wrote that was a threat, they put the letters JK, which we're told that means just kidding. And you look at that in amazement that somehow that a person, any person, especially a child, could say things like that, make comments that are threatening, and be excused because it was tagged with an ending of just kidding. And that just, unfortunately, is not a first time around for that type of behavior. Welcome, Eunice and Marius and Shona. Glad to have you with us today. And I'm looking forward to hearing your perspectives on what our culture has come to, especially in terms of the license we take under the auspices of comedy or humor. And by the way, I know it could be assumed that I am down on humor. Not at all. In fact, part of what I talk about, especially with my business partner Anton on Tuesday mornings with our podcaster show, is the need, the value of humor, having fun, laughter, and everything to be healthy. And so please don't take these comments as I have anything against humor, that I think that we should always be serious and all that. That's not where my mind is or my heart is in this matter. Let's see. Shona makes a comment. I don't condone what Will Smith did. I think in this instance, Chris Rock may have learned a lesson. Think before you use another person's experience as a punchline. No pun intended. I agree with you. Again, I don't condone what Will Smith did either. I don't think it's appropriate, even with good intentions. It appears that he was protecting his wife's honor in the process, and so on. I appreciate it, but that behavior in that circumstances was not appropriate. But I still marvel that nothing has really been said to address the comment. And what's especially sad is that the comment under the guise of humor that was made was about Will Smith's wife and something that she could do nothing about. It's actually a medical condition, and to make a joke about it seems pretty sad. And what's even sadder is that culturally, it appears that we're giving that a pass because he was making a joke and trying to be funny and all that. And I go, wow, have we gotten to a point that we can say anything that we want and not have concern over it because it's just a joke? And Shona adds another comment. If you need to say it's a joke or just kidding, then you know deep down it could hurt the other person. I agree with you, Shona. I think the fact that a rationale or excuse is given tells me that there's a good possibility that they knew, or people that do it know that what they're doing is probably not good or healthy or right even. And so they find a way to justify it. So, yeah. And I think that those of us that are seeking to be wise in what we do need to take note. And part of the struggle I have as I grow in wisdom and encounter what we see around us is that then I have to think, okay, what is wise in my response to such things? And I think a lot of us struggle with that. We hear someone make a joke at someone else's expense. How do we react? How do we respond as wisdom seekers to that? And that's another part of what I hope we can talk about a bit today and figure out the best ways or some ways to be able to respond wisely to those situations. Marius makes a comment, respect gives respect. Humor should never be offensive. Humor should always be gentle with good intentions. I agree with you, Marius, and I know when I am speaking or if I am training, I use humor, and there's nothing wrong with healthy, clean humor. And I believe that we can do it and do so wisely. I know one of the other areas that we have to be wise in using humor is, in addition to not going after other people, especially as one of my LinkedIn network folks said, is that especially not commenting on things that people can't do anything about. Commenting and making light of choices, sometimes that can be appropriate. Certainly, we have to be cognizant of the relationship and the context as we use humor, by all means. Welcome, Richard. Welcome, Maureen. Glad to see you this morning. Welcome, Lee. Glad to see you with us as usual. And so we just need to be careful of another aspect, and that is when we use humor at our own expense. And I understand that there are moments, and I don't have a problem poking fun at myself. And I think it's can be have value to do so. But even that, I suggest that if we're going to be wise, that we be very careful, because in self-deprecating humor, things that we tear ourselves down become part of our narrative and can be unhealthy for us. So again, I think we need to approach the whole concept of humor and do so with wisdom, and not just casually assume that, oh, I'm just kidding, so that makes everything all right. And Rick makes comments, celebrities are immune from criticism. Unfortunately, in our culture, that has become the case. And again, I think there is, unfortunately, a special level of immunity for people, comedians and so on, that say things under the guise of being funny, that and somehow that makes it okay to say things like they do. And I agree with you, Maureen, that humor is powerful, very powerful, powerful for good, but also can be powerful for bad. And we unfortunately have people that are behaving unwisely, and they don't distinguish between the two and consider the different, the power involved. And I would even say, words are powerful, period. But comedy or humor can be especially, I don't know, more impactful, because not only are you saying something that could be hurtful, now you're making someone the butt of a joke, if you will, and it's just concerning to me. Zaid makes a comment. I would say that in the specific subculture of the Oscar, they have their own norms, not necessarily it represents the rest of us. Yeah, I agree that, and that's part of the reason, frankly, that I rarely watch any live TV anymore, because of such a cultural norm among the media elites and so on. They seem to think that somehow they are immune from criticism or being challenged. And I think quite often that under the guise of comedy, that things are done and said that don't reflect current cultural norms. But I will say, unfortunately, I believe that these same people, under the auspices of comedy, have tried to present a perspective on life that is not accurate, to a point, though, that it is affecting the general populace as to what is normal, what is funny, even. And it is concerning, because some of this has been used in our culture to lower our cultural standards as part of the process. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I don't think it's been done without intent, in terms of affecting cultural norms and challenging these norms through comedy. And again, I really question the wisdom involved, and trying to figure out how that we should respond, so that it is clear that we don't believe that those kinds of norms represent us. Karen makes a comment. We shall think before speak. Choice of words. That is so critical, Karen. A key point is think before we speak. And again, we need to be careful that and part of our thinking process, that just because we think it's funny and others laugh at it doesn't make it right, doesn't make it wise. And that's the part that I hope that we can begin to grow and grow in our understanding and gain wisdom in regards to it. And also, again, how do we respond to those kinds of situations? What should we do so that we can have an effect, be a force for good in regards to some of this, so that it isn't allowed to become part of our cultural norm? Let's see. Rick makes a comment. I just don't go there unless I really know them personally. It's where we are. Yeah, when I am speaking in private with a close friend, I will be more likely to use humor that I would not necessarily use publicly. And it's not that the humor is bad, but it's of a personal nature. And I know that I have a relationship with that person, that we can have those points of laughter without it being hurtful. I think that we call this is an inside joke. In other words, only the parties involved get the joke of it. And I realized, in fact, yesterday on the post in regards to that I put out in regards to use of humor, I used a kind of a little bit of a inside joke, if you will, or a subtle type of humor. And my dear friend did not understand it because the context, and I had to explain it. And even then, I realized that when we use humor, and we need to really consider, do people get it, or could it be misconstrued? And so I just think we need to use more wisdom in regards to this topic, so that we can get the great benefit of laughter and humor without being harmful to those that are subject to it. And Marius makes a comment: celebrities can't claim to stand against bullying, but then use humor to bully others. Yeah, that's the certain contradiction and irony that I see, Marius, as well as many of these celebrities that would make jokes at others' expense, would decry bullying greatly, and yet what happens is, under the guise of humor, under I am just kidding, I'm just making a joke, we see them behaving in a way that's a form of bullying. When you make fun of somebody in front of a big audience, or even just publicly, especially about something that they can't control, to me, that's part of the very definition of bullying. Yet, among many circles, and especially the Hollywood elite circles, that's become, unfortunately, normal and part of their behavior. And so, yeah, the hypocrisy involved is quite remarkable. Excuse me. And Marius makes another comment: Jesus never said a joke towards others. He is my example, even for humor. I agree. We've been given a great example of a servant leader, and of one that is wise in their words, very wise, in fact, to a point that the words that Jesus used were always very carefully chosen and used in such a way that it reflects the character of God, and that is love, and which is ultimately the measure we should be using in our behaviors, and especially in our use of words. We need to mimic that and behave from a position of love in all that we say. Eunice makes a comment: it's also linked to increased materialism, increased parent-child conflict, and negative body image among girls. Unfortunately, yes, because now we have our behaviors that are measured in part by humor in regards to our behaviors, including how we dress and behave. And because it's made a joke, somehow that justifies it or makes it okay. And theoretically, as it's done more and more, it is somehow normalizes what should not be normalized or accepted. And certainly, again, part of this conversation, part of what we've got to consider. Richard makes a comment. Comedy at its core is designed to make people think and talk about what we think. I agree. Humor can be used in such a way to cause us to think and consider, because in I think the word that I think of for this is lampooning. And sometimes there is cause and need for lampooning, but even that is where we have to be very careful. And that is that we not lampoon or use sarcasm or whatever in regards to a person, but rather an issue, and separate that. And even choice of timing, making a lampoon in regards to a topic without expressing it towards a particular person, but done at a timing where someone that is present that is part of that issue potentially is wrong. So just because it's humor and just because it may be okay in some situations doesn't mean that it is okay in every situation. Welcome, Sharon. Glad to have you with us. And let's see, we've got some other guests here this morning. Glad to have Ed Mario, one of our regulars, and Mosin. Glad to have you, John, you as well. Thanks for joining. And hello, Sherry. Glad to have you with us as well. And so as we look, again, we're not discussing necessarily whether it is legal or even moral, some of the things said, but our question is it wise? Just because it's legal to say it, even if it's moral to say it, is it wise to say it? And this is especially true with comedy or joking, because the power of it, all words are powerful, but in especially certain settings, joking comedy have an extra measure of power because of the way comedy is taken and how it affects us and others. Lee comments, unfortunately, most comedians aren't clean. And I agree that unfortunately now that a part of the culture of comedy and humor in our world has become the nastier the better, the more risque, the more use of profanity, more use of discussing or joking about topics that aren't wise to do so publicly has become part of that norm, to a point now. I find it remarkable. If you want to find some good humor and laugh a lot and so on, now you have to look for humor that is classified as family friendly or clean. And I think to myself, how have we gotten to a point where now we have humor and expression that is not considered clean or appropriate for all circumstances? It's just a part of the indication of where we become culturally, and especially in the area of comedy and humor. That seems to be fraught with an extra measure of unwise use of words. Ed Mario makes a comment that this week we can receive great blessings from the Creator, God of the universe and earth. Thank you for that, Mario. We all can use blessings, certainly. I agree with you, and I appreciate that. And Marius makes a comment: pride is also a foundation of bad humor. Indeed, because some of this bad humor is based in the idea that somehow the person sharing the humor or speaking it is somehow better than the object of the humor. And again, goes to the point of this concept of bullying, because pride is a part of bullying as well. And hello, Sherry. Glad to have you with us today. Good to see you. And so I hope that as we look at this, we will begin to approach and consider, are we, those of us that claim to be wisdom seekers, are we wise in how we use humor? And again, please understand, I am not suggesting that the solution is to somehow see humor as bad, because it isn't. In fact, someone that is humorless is likely unhealthy. There is a problem, a disconnect that needs to be considered. And so I don't want it to be perceived that I am speaking and suggesting that we become devoid of humor. So let's move along. Lee makes a comment, and this is a good observation. Says, always felt public roasting was distasteful and hurtful. And you know, I have to admit that I have enjoyed public roasts at times, because at moments they're dealing with a person and specific behaviors and all. And I have considered those funny, but as you mention it, it's something worth considering. Is that a good way of doing things? And it has become an accepted norm. Now, interestingly enough, when we see that, most times it's in a public light and it's among media elites, and so again, it's fostered in a place in a way that, for me, questions whether it should be, and whether it is of value, even though quite often, now I have to say that in these situations, people that get roasted in those situations quite often are not, shouldn't be surprised and have to submit themselves to that form of behavior. But again, I have to question the wisdom of it at times. Let's see. Richard makes a comment. Watch, please, the old Dean Martin roast. They are, although scripted, still pretty darn funny, especially when Foster Brooks shows up. Yeah, I public roasting that's done is a unique environment, and I do question sometimes the wisdom of it. But one of the things about those roasts that are scripted, again, the person being roasted has assented to being a part of that. So in that case, the idea that it is offensive to that person, they have agreed to be a part of it. So fine line in there, and I have to agree. Again, the roasts are really funny. And yes, Richard, I especially liked Foster Brooks, because he just, in my mind, was very funny. And most of the time, his humor was, unless in case of a roast, was directed at a behavior that we see culturally, that and that was about drunkenness. So let's see here, keeping right along. By the way, welcome to Matthew. And I have to take license as a father to say I'm proud of him. He is my son and glad to have him here. And I appreciate his comments. I'll get to his in a moment. Let's see. And Mario makes a comment that in today's world, it's not easy to keep a good mood at work, even more so in metropolitan regions of the country. Appointments for yesterday, traffic, and so on. Yeah, it's tough to keep humor, and no doubt about it. And so when we can use humor in those environments, healthy humor, it's a good idea because as people point out, that laughter is very healthy and helpful. Sharon makes a comment. She says many people speak before they think what they're before they think. Let me try that again. Many people speak before they think what they're saying, which may hurt others. Once the words are spoken, they cannot be taken back, and it might hurt others. And that's why I think, as wisdom seekers, that we need to, at a minimum, be thoughtful and have measured responses, and be very considerate of our words, knowing that our words have impact. They can be greatly impactful in a positive way, but they can also be greatly impactful in a negative sense. Matthew makes the comment, I think roasting can be funny, but must be done very carefully, both in good taste and carefully around friends. And I think that's a wise approach, is considering that roasting and that use of approaching things is best done in a more known environment among people that are agreeing to be there and be a party to such behaviors. And yeah, Lee, I remember Don Rickles, and in some ways, Don Rickles could be very funny, but many times he was very caustic. But what happened is no one challenged his behaviors. And I think he was part of the reason that we have the humor we have today, that is at people's expense, and that is, considered, since it was just in a comedic environment, that it was all okay. And I think that's part of the reason we're here today, and something that we need to challenge and consider. Zaid makes a comment, I think this subject of humor is a friction point between the traditional culture norms of the mid of the country and the coastal progressive culture. It could be regional, certainly. It is certainly, unfortunately, become a way, a means by which cultural norms are challenged, because they are made fun of as somehow wrong, restrictive, whatever. And again, we see proliferation of that behaviors and that kind of comedy starting, unfortunately, around the time that we had a generational rebellion that occurred in the 60s and 70s. Difference between what was done in that time frame is that no one challenged whether the rebellion, if you will, which is all part of what happens in our culture, whether it should have been accepted and allowed, at least to the level that it was without challenge. Let's see here. Matthew comments, it is also interesting to see the times where Jesus used both humor and sarcasm in his speaking. Indeed, he had moments where he used humor and even sarcasm, but when it was done for the purpose of the betterment of the hearing audience, and to And indeed, he even used it in challenging some of the norms of his day. And again, wisely done is very healthy and very effective. And he is a great example, our best example as a wise servant leader to consider, no doubt. Lee makes a comment. Many comedians, even clean ones, will no longer perform on college campuses. Uh, yeah, that's a whole nother topic, that college campuses have become a place of so-called, I don't know, free expression and thought, yet they are at the heart of questioning freedom of expression and not allowing really freedom expression. So, yeah, I can understand why many people, comedians or otherwise, would be avoiding those situations indeed. And let's see, Sherry makes a comment. I enjoy healthy humor and a great laugh, just not when the words are mean-spirited and or hurtful. That's the reason I stopped going to comedy clubs. People on the front row were often made fun of in a bad public way. And I agree. Uh, in some ways, and this is, boy, I'm probably going to catch some flack over this, but in some ways and for reasons, I would even question the value that we have culturally uh, set up in such a way that having um, comedy clubs, the concept of a comedy club, just I kind of question that. Why have we gotten to a point that we can have a whole industry around comedy? And the fact that we do tells me that there may be a misaligned priority here. And so, again, I think it's time that we as wisdom seekers really challenge the question of the validity and the value of how we treat and use humor currently. And so, and by the way, again, sorry if I'm being a proud father and grandfather, but just found out that my Matthew's wife and my grandkids are also watching. And so I have to mention that and appreciate them and their being a part of this. It's both honoring, and then having them present makes me question or challenge my own words to be very wise in that, because especially want to be a good example for our families involved. Another reason to be careful and consider the humor we use. Richard, thanks for stopping in. Appreciate it. That I understand you got to get to work, and I appreciate you taking time to be here. And Zaid makes a comment. He says, Sharon, that's true, but we also should expect some to be that way. We always should have in the back of our mind that words are just words, and we should know who we are enough to not to allow a word or a joke for that matter to hurt us. And Zaid, you bring up a good point, and I have I've always been in an interesting place because I am asked to support anti-bullying moves and initiatives and so on. And I have to say very clearly, I don't think bullying is a good behavior. I think it's wrong. I think indicates a cultural and, more importantly, a parental failure. But on the other side of that coin, people say, well, how do we protect our children from bullying, which what we're talking about in the way this humor is used is really in a way a form of bullying, is that we talk about, well, outlawing words or those kinds of things. And I appreciate the intent, but I don't think that's a wise approach. I think the wise approach is that we, for ourselves, for our families, our children, our grandchildren, not so much worry about the bullying, if you will, but if we build character into our lives and the lives of others, um, that is one of the best ways to, if you will, bully proof ourselves and others. Because at the heart of the what causes the sting of ill used humor or bullying or whatever is the thought that whatever is being joked about or said could somehow have truth in it. And that's where we begin to have character and understand and accept the way God has created us, and rely in that rather than other things. And when as I've gotten to that point, in fact, I recognize my own behaviors and even joke about those behaviors myself. And so again, there's a balance in there to be found. And in and around humor, I think we just need to consider whether how whether or not we are using humor wisely as a culture. And therefore, the other part of that question becomes, how do we individually use humor? And consider that, because part of influence and affecting what goes on around us starts with our choices, our personal responsibility. And if more of us don't participate in that kind of humor or word usage or other behaviors, the more we stand up and just don't do those things ourselves and don't participate. And for example, and this is hard because of cultural pressures, when people make jokes that are inappropriate, we don't necessarily have to stand up and say, oh, that was wrong, you shouldn't have said it. Just by not laughing at it, choosing not to give it credence, can go a long way towards impacting how people respond. And if enough people don't laugh at bad humor, at some point, the other people involved, the comedians or those using that humor, will get the message that that's not acceptable. And it doesn't have to be done in a way that is somehow dramatic or forces people in a bad way. But when we choose to behave personally in ways that is appropriate, even among inappropriate behaviors, we become a factor in helping overcome that and affecting those behaviors around us. Sharon makes a comment. I agree with Sherry James. I also enjoy healthy humor and laughter, but not at the expense of others. And again, I would add to that, and being careful that when we use humor, using it at our own expense can have a negative impact as well. Because if we're not careful, it can become part of a narrative that we tell ourselves that help breed unhealthiness in us. And yeah, Lee, you bring up a topic, and I thought about this, the humor in politics. You get into political cartoon and things like that. And that's another tough topic in our culture today, because our politics have become very divisive, and to a point that it isn't about values and character and issues. It's become about attacking the people involved. And I believe that that's needs to be challenged. I think that we need to consider whether those things are wise as well. I know it's become very commonplace to lampoon people in politics, and especially in ways that are, again, become accepted as norms, and don't think it should be. I think that we need to challenge in that environment whether we agree with someone's choices or whether we agree with their behaviors. We shouldn't attack the person involved. Certainly okay to challenge behaviors and choices, but not attack the person. And unfortunately, in our culture, a byproduct of the lack of wisdom in our culture is even knowing how to attack a problem and not the messenger. Probably maybe a topic for another day to discuss that, how to separate issues from the person. And there is actually a very strong principle in regards to it. But again, that would need to be a topic for another day. So Zaid makes a comment. I can control my own behavior, but I should be strong enough and wise enough that I face someone that use a bad joke and bully me for any reason, that this is his, her opinion and of who I am. I suffered from it, and then I discovered I should know who I am and not expect everyone out there to be behaving in the same level. Yeah, to me, being able to be secure in who we are, and that's the reason that I have a quote talking about our value. And by truly getting and accepting, finding, and living what our value is, not because we think we've earned it, because we don't earn our value. It's given to us by our Creator, and others don't give us our value, and therefore they can't take it away. And since we don't earn it, we can't lose it. So the more we can be so strong and confident in our value and who we've been created to be, the more likely that people's bad behaviors, bad humor, and even bullying are ineffective. And by the way, again, I'll try not to chase too much of a rabbit here, but in regards to bullying, part of the intent of those that bully is a response from their target. And the more we object and respond or react to the bullying, the more likely it is to happen. And so the strength of character to just look at it and dismiss it, the attempts at bullying, dismiss those as having any reality to it, is the best way to diffuse it. And when a bully doesn't get the satisfaction of a response from us, one of hurt or whatever, most times eventually they're going to just leave it alone and quit doing it. And let's see. Marius makes a comment. Standing up against bad humor is like standing up against bullying. I agree. And I think that the key to maybe both, no, I would say a key to both is indeed being secure in who we are and not giving those that use bad humor or bullying, not give them the satisfaction of a response, therefore somehow dignifying or acknowledging their behaviors. And just like I said earlier, one of the ways to express that we don't agree with the use of the humor is simply don't participate by not laughing. And not, we say, well, somehow that, in fact, we laugh sometimes at bad humor because we're nervous and we don't want to be a problem. But there's a point where appropriate non-response is one of the best responses there are. In fact, the older I get, and hopefully the wiser I get, I realize that a non-response, which means quite often keeping our mouth closed, is more powerful than any words or actions we could take. And so as we grow wiser, learning to follow our design priority, which we have, and what I'm referring to design priority is the fact that we have 2 ears, we have 2 eyes, but only 1 mouth, that it is better quite often to just be silent or non-responsive, because then we remove ourselves from the cause, and we become an impact of, if you will, raising a standard that's not acceptable, whatever those behaviors are. And so, again, humor. Do we want to have it? Certainly, yes. Humor's great. Having good laugh, very great. And how we respond and what is humorous varies a bit among us. And we should, by the way, be sensitive to how we use humor based on the audience involved. But humor is not an excuse, and it doesn't justify saying and doing things that are harmful, hurtful, or just unwise. And so as we as a culture take steps to be responsive, and which again, sometimes the best response is a non-response, and in the especially in the area of humor, somebody uses humor in a way that we think is inappropriate, we don't laugh, we don't acknowledge it, we do not give it credence, and by doing so, eventually, whoever is the person using inappropriate or poor humor will get the message, and the fact that it makes us uncomfortable not to respond to humor that's inappropriate tells us that we know it will be recognized and that it will be impactful. And even that, we have to be considerate and wise in how we approach it. Welcome, Josoon. Glad to have you with us. And Josoon makes a comment: humor is the highest form of intelligence, but as everything else, can be used with bad and good intentions, by all means. And the intent of the use of the humor is certainly a factor. And the other key to this, just like other forms of communication, which humor is a form of communication, is context. If we say certain things out of a proper context, at a minimum, it's misunderstood. And quite often, if we say things out of context, people are going to look at us and wonder if there's something wrong with us. And so considering the context of our humor is another way to be wise in approaching that. Let's see. Okay, we've got one more comment here, question. You know what I used to do sometimes? I would laugh also on the jokes he made on me. This used to bother him more than he intended. A response he expected from me. Eventually he stopped. I still don't care about that bully just because I knew who I am. Yeah, and again, certain situations, somebody tries to make fun of us. Laughing along with them can sometimes be a way to diffuse it, because laughing with them doesn't give them the intended result. So, wow, wisdom and humor, just like any wisdom, how does it impact those around us, and how does it impact us inwardly and outwardly, needs to be a question that we use in evaluating words and humor, how we use it, not just how we use it, but when we use it, because humor is good quite in many ways, but inappropriate at times, even if it would otherwise be good. So consider the context, be wise in our words, especially humor, because of the power. Thank you, everyone. I hope that we can pursue wisdom together, and as a result, walking in our wisdom, hopefully have a positive impact to influence against unwise behavior without having to make it dramatic, but just effective by being wise in an unwise world. So thanks for being here today. Appreciate all of you and your comments. Always insightful, helpful, and it makes for a much better show for us. So thank you. Look forward to seeing you again next week. We've actually, over the next several weeks, got a number of guests coming up, and I'll get word out about them. And I think you will enjoy those folks and hearing about their wisdom journey. So thanks, everyone. God bless. Have an amazing week. Hello to my daughter-in-law, Megan, and my grandchildren, Isaiah and Jeremiah and Abigail. One of my favorite audiences of all. So thanks, everyone. See you next Monday at 8 o'clock. God bless. Take care. Bye.